to describe conditions that affect the heart or blood vessels. This disease is often associated with an increased risk of blood clots, which can cause damage to arteries in organs such as the brain, heart, kidneys, and the eyes. The causes of cardiovascular disease can be traced to the amount of sodium we consume in our food, such as salt, processed foods, milk, creams, and condiments like fish, sauce, amongst others. And the World Health Organization recommends reducing sodium intake to avoid the risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, or heart disease. Adults should consume no more than 5 grams of salt per day, and children should consume 2 to 3 grams. You can prevent this disease by leading a healthy lifestyle, saying no to excessive sodium intake, eating fresh foods, using herbs and spices to flavor food, and reducing the consumption of processed food. Well, we have in the studio to discuss this a medical consultant and Chief Medical Director, Heritage Men's Clinic, Dr. Rashid Abbasi. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you join us. There are those who ask the question, how does consuming salt relate to cardiovascular disease? What is the correlation? How does that even happen?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So salt, in its original way, it's not meant to be consumed. Salt is a preservative. Somewhere along the line, people discover that the more salt they put, the food gets tastier, and we start taking it. But the concern for us in physiology or in medicine is wherever salt goes, water goes. And where does that water end up? It ends up in your bloodstream. So that means the amount of work your heart has to do increases. And this heart is a machine, is meant to pump only 5 liters of blood. In you, in me, in little kids, it's 5 liters. So the more salt you consume, salt pulls water, the water goes into your blood, and the volume increases. So the machine is struggling, and that's where the word cardiac comes in. So when the machine is struggling, it's not able to pump enough blood into the vessels. When blood doesn't flow, it clots, and that's where we get into trouble.
Right, and but then there is also another school of thoughts by medical experts as yourself who say on the face level of it, salt is good, is good, but and they even go on to say now that advocating less salt could also come with some risks. So help us to marry with.
Absolutely. So in previous research, we realized that there are some people in our society that just have low blood pressure. They are hypotensive under normal circumstances. Hypo. Yeah. Their blood pressure is not normal, it's not high. And so we realize that the hypotension itself is not really good because your organs need certain amount of pressure. When your heart pumps, the kidney gets a quarter. So if your blood pressure is low, the kidney is going to suffer from that. So they advocated back in then to give a little bit of salt because we know salt will increase your pressure. But now, as we do all the time, we go back and review, we realize that even for people with normal pressure, consuming salt over time will lead to bad issues. And so that's why they came out recently in December, January, that salt is actually no-no.
Well, you see, this same matter has led people to discover things like sea salt, Himalaya salt, all sorts of salt, and they say, okay, these ones are better than some others. Talk to us. Is there a difference, and is one better consumed than the other?
Absolutely, and take my word for research is abundantly clear. No salt is good, especially when it comes to we black people. Why? Because we are full of melanin. Melanin holds on to salt. When it holds on to salt, it has to look for water. Just like when you put table salt on your table at home, give it a few days, it's going to melt, it turns into water. That water goes into your bloodstream, and again, it's a matter of numbers. The volume goes up, your heart struggles.
So none of that sea salt?
Sea salt, Himalayan salt, all those. They evaluated. None of them is good for you and I. Salt is not meant to be consumed. It's a preservative.
All right. And, okay, so we have this advice, over the years, people when you get to a certain age, cut out salt. If you can do without it, the better for you. But how do you advise patients, people to carry out a relatable salt reduction regimen, so to speak? How do you, what's like the easiest way to go about this?
Absolutely. So in our clinic, what we do is for me to tell you to do something, I have to be willing to give you an alternative. What is there to replace it? So most of us here use salt as a condiment, seasoning. You can go alternate ways. We do cloves. we do ginger, we do garlic, you do crayfish. These are natural and they do not contain the deadly sodium. That's the issue. And the truth of the matter is your taste bud and my taste bud will not miss salt after 7 days.
Really?
Yes, after 7 days. Trust me, this has been experimented. So after 7 days, when someone gives you something salty, you'll be the one, oh, there's so much
Well,
salt.
you see, they will tell you that these alternatives that you're calling are quite expensive when it comes to buying the regular salt as it is. But that aside, we look at children.
Yes.
You see that parents want to give them most of the processed foods that we see because they feel, okay, they are still children, it wouldn't affect them whichever way, and then so they keep buying these things for them. And then we see also these foods, I don't want to mention them because of advertisement and all. So I'm wondering, let's even look at children, the other side, because from what we just read, 2 to 3 grams of children, I'm wondering what the impact is on a child.
Absolutely. So we have to be careful because as parents, your children become what you actually give them. We are what we eat. And so they develop addiction. Just like to salt, they develop the same addiction to sweet tooth, to sugars, because their brain is very vulnerable. So at that time, that's when we need to step in and try to give them the right foundation. The 2 to 3 grams, because they're still growing, so they need a little bit of pressure. And that's what the study has shown. That you need to just be on the minimal side. Because when they get to the free world, they're faced with a lot of options that are processed. All these processed food, the only way they can stay on the shelf for that long is they use the preservative, which is salt, to keep them. Anything that lasts long than expected on the shelf contains a lot of sodium. And that's what you need as parents to be advocates to prevent your kids from consuming.
In terms of policy in this regard, because even here in Africa, more people are eating out, are choosing, all these fancy foods rather than
say add more. It's sweet.
Absolutely. And to be sincere, you can actually taste the salt, but I don't know what they add.
Taste buds I've just been used to them.
I don't know what else they add that just makes you want to continue to eating them. But in terms of policy, do you think we are lax as you know, in terms of governance, so to speak, when you look at what obtains abroad? If there is a way that governments can also clamp down on these manufacturers to reduce their salt?
Absolutely. We need the agency to be strengthened because then we have to take control over what we produce compared to what we import. So it has to be the agency control that says, look, what are we importing and then what are we making locally? But we also have to be aware of our socioeconomic situations. A lot of people eat from mama put. The more you eat outside, you lose control over what you're actually consuming because you buy, so you are exposed. So we have to be very mindful. But to your bigger point, the government agency, maybe NAFDAC, any agency in terms of the food regulation, needs to come up because we're paying the price. We are paying the price. We're full of cardiovascular issues, the likes of high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, metabolic syndrome. West Africa is inundated with too much numbers and it's killing us. And now what we see in our clinic is it's even affecting fertility. Salt.
Wow.
Don't take my word for it. That's what the research says.
Wow.
Interesting. So talk to us about MSG, because that's another controversial matter. And when you look at seasoning cubes, salt, MSG are part of it, but there are those who have said, MSG is actually necessary for consumption. So help us better understand, these complexities when we're talking about feeding.
So we need to be careful where this study comes from. So if you're going with lobbying or manufacturers of this MSG, then we need to look at it with a second look. So MSG, sodium, all these contain too much additives just to keep the food to stay longer on our shelf. We're not meant to be consuming things that do not go bad in 24 hours. So the more we consume those things, we're consuming chemicals. Just think about it. If you have a food that you can leave on your table counter and it can last for days without going bad, you need to check the chemical composition. They are processed. And the more they are processed, the more your organs will have to deal with those chemicals. Some of these chemicals are synthesized. They are not what our grandparents were used to.
Right.
And the word organic. So we need to go back to those that do not have any of these chemicals. MSG is relatively new to our generation. Our grandparents did not have those. So we need to find why were there less cardiovascular issues with our grandparents. And we are supposed to be more affluent of the generation. Yes, we don't move. We're more sedentary. We consume more of this processed food. We're loaded with sodium.
It's easy to just, take care of whatever. You just
Right.
put them in the microwave and do what is necessary.
So now we're paying the price. We're paying the price heavily because now our average lifespan in Nigeria is just got to 60. We used to be in the 50s. Why are people dying so young? Cardiovascular. Our problem in this part of the world is not communicable disease. It's not infection. It's the non-communicable silent killers. High blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, metabolic syndrome. We're the generation, we're not moving, we're consuming, we're tied to smartphone, we sit for too long. Sitting is the new smoking.
Right.
Sitting is the new smoking. And then you had that with sodium. Because on the cellular level, what salt does is it destroys your blood vessel and my blood vessel. There is something in our body called endothelium. It lines all our smooth muscle. It allows you to breathe without even knowing. But when you consume salt, it gets stiff. So now your breathing becomes conscious. And that's a damaging effect.
Right. But, manufacturers now, I wonder what your advice would be to manufacturers, especially of food and the likes, who cannot do without using salt to preserve their products.
So that's where we need the government agency, because the government agency has the leverage. So we should not accept that from any manufacturer saying we cannot use this amount of salt. No. The government agency has the evidence on their side, because we cannot lose our most precious resource, which is the human life. And the more we allow them to trade that for profit, that's where the issue comes in. The US government banned their own salt consumption back in December. They stipulated it. They've given them warnings ahead of time, because if you continue to allow that, manufacturers go for profit. I will not blame them. They're in there for money. Right. But then our life is precious, so you have to look at it. Quality of life matters.
Yeah, you mentioned something about how this affects our breathing, and I'm wondering if this is why people snore when they sleep.
Absolutely. One of the things we pick up on signs and symptoms of somebody having cardiovascular issues, obstructive sleep apnea, because the more salt you consume, the more water retains in their lungs. So the moment they lay down, their palate, the tongue goes backward and the water comes up, so they snore heavily. They are not getting into the restful stage of sleep, so their blood pressure goes up. The endothelium gets stiffened, so blood vessels are tight, blood pressure goes up, it leads to stroke. We have to ask ourselves, people who snore like that, why is it that most of them also end up having stroke early in the morning?
Early in the morning?
Yes. 89% of strokes are occurring in the morning.
Explain that to us.
That's
yes,
okay.
Exactly. Because remember, sleep is the only time that your brain and my brain has opportunity to relax. And there are 4 stages of sleep: 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 4th one is the most important: rapid eye movement. That's when you are totally out. Most people, especially this part of the world, we're sleep deprived. We hardly get into sleep. We are chronic insomniacs. When you don't sleep, your body goes into stress control. Cortisol goes up. Obstructive sleep apnea is worsened. You gain a lot of weight. Blood pressure shoots up. So by the time you wake up in the morning, when your body is releasing the adrenaline that you need for the day, it increases blood pressure more, boom, stroke.
Wow. And of course, you also talked about infertility.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This, help us to understand this. Yes. What makes it so?
This is very concerning to us in the men's clinic space, because so most men now are coming to us with low sperm count. And not only that, when we look at semen fluid analysis, the typical SFA, we need most men that want to have babies to have sperm that can move. That sperm that can move needs fluidity. But when you consume too much salt, the osmotic level goes up. So the sperm gets clogged. They cannot get to the egg.
So let's even now come back to this matter of the right amount. How do you measure what the right amount is? Because we're saying 5 grams of salt per day. Is it that you avoid it in the morning, have it in the afternoon, avoid it at night? How do you even measure?
So we're hoping that most of our listeners just become educated consumers. We want them to look at everything they're eating. And yes, we have the caveat that most people eat out, so they don't have control.
Yes. Right.
What we recommend is 2,000 milligrams, which is about 4 grams a day. Because we need to be aggressive about this. And we know for a fact that your taste bud will not miss it after a week. So the more aggressive, the better. Because it will be difficult to say, how much do you take in the morning, afternoon, and night? Some people don't even have the opportunity to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Actually.
They only eat once and they're loaded. Yes. And again, we know the mama put, the food tends to taste better with all this sodium. So that's where the issue comes in. And when you find out that you're becoming thirsty more than usual, that's a sign that you are salt loaded.
All right.
Yes, because you have to be mindful. You are salt loaded. When you're waking up,
but people thought it was sugar that made people feel thirsty.
That's one of those things. You know, there was a time we discussed the issue of salt and sugar, but
Right.
in this case, salt is actually more deadly. Let me give you another small one. How do we use to kill people on death row? We infuse them with salt.
Oh, really?
Oh,
But it can't be just salt.
No, it's just salt. When we put the IV in and someone is on death row and we're about to make them go, it's salt. We don't give them anything. It's not sugar, it's salt. You can Google it. You can get, yeah, it's concentrated salt we use.
So we're actually dealing with a lethal weapon. So
It is, honestly. And we're this part of the world, our number one killers are cardiovascular. And one of the risk factors for cardiovascular is sodium intake.
All right. Well, looking through at what some countries are doing, there is also concerns that governments. Nigeria joined other countries in committing to 30% reduction of salt, but the concern all over the world, not just Nigeria, is enforcement and all of that. Some are also saying that while government also needs to do the needful, we too also need to read before you buy that. Yes, labels. Before you buy that product, read it. But some would also say those products are very, very written. They are written in tiny fonts.
You can barely read them.
You can, absolutely. So would you also be advocating that government, is there a way to push these manufacturers to make these warnings as bold as possible?
Before you answer that quickly, we need to quickly go on a commercial break. When we return, we'll continue from there. Stay with us.
A lush woman goes for it and thinks later. A lush woman may fail again and again because nobody ever starts out a pro. A lush woman stands up to all stereotypes, and with every stand, she'll be doing it for her, and her. Lush hair. Be beautiful.
All right, thank you for staying with us. We're talking about salt and its implication to your heart health as it is. And before we went on the break, Doctor, we're asking you how we can enforce this, especially on manufacturers, because when we talk about reading labels, it's quite difficult and challenging to read these labels. But what more can the government do to enforcing this thing such that manufacturers do the needful?
Absolutely. So we have to give, the manufacturers are in it for one thing, just money. Profit. It's just profit. And they realize that the sodium allows their product to last longer on the shelf. The longer it lasts, the more they can reach to people. So that's where we need the government enforcement agencies. Just like the way they're going aggressively about drugs, they can do the same thing, because salt is really killing us. So we have to be mindful. So there could be random checks. And once you're fined, then they can actually ban you. But our concern is actually larger than that, because majority of our people eat from Mama Put. Mama Put doesn't have any labeled food.
Okay, that's another point.
Honestly, so we have to, we need educated consumers. We have to be, because we are what we eat.
So should we be looking at shutting down some of these Mama Puts, and, how do we even enforce these laws with some of these persons who are seemingly not even educated as it is?
Yes,
don't care.
We did some medical mission and we were telling people don't do salt, and the woman started crying that everything she does in her life involves salt. Because we are culturally bounded to it. So what we're doing is awareness to say, look, we need to start cutting down on this, because it does have all these little effects. It's been proven. We don't need, the research is out there. It's related to cardiovascular. The more you consume, the more cardiovascular issues you're going to face. Well,
so are we now saying that low sodium intake is the solution to any issues that has to do with cardiovascular health as it is? Because in my research, there were talks about controversies surrounding if low intake of salt or sodium is really the solution.
Absolutely. So there is no one answer that fits up. But what we know is at the cellular level, if we cut out sodium, the likes of silent killer high blood pressure goes down. We know that. So if I can make your diet to be out of salt, I can assure you that 10 to 15 millimeters of your blood pressure will drop. So if I can make you not to be hypertensive, I can reverse your risk of getting stroke. Your risk of diabetes goes down. And then we need other things. We're not moving. We are one of those generations where we're just sedentary. Sitting becomes the new smoking. So that tells us it's bad. If you don't move, your blood doesn't move. When blood doesn't move, it clots. So those are the other 5 and 6 of cardiovascular issues. We have other things. We're sleep deprived. We're not sleeping.
Yeah, we wake up too early.
We wake up too early. We have insomnia, sleep too late. And so our quality of sleep is gone. Our quantity of sleep, we cannot even talk about it.
Okay, and well, making these necessary changes, lifestyle changes can be very challenging.
Right.
So how do you beat that? Some say, okay, don't be too hard on yourself. Just do a gradual reduction in salt in the context of our conversation. But how do you beat the difficult nature of cutting down or making the needed changes to save your health?
So we have to look at what's the bigger picture. So everybody, is the beginning of the year, people come up with new goals, and it's difficult New Year resolution, and it's difficult to stick to it. But you don't want to bite more than you can chew, or chew more than you. So take it one step at a time. If your goal is this year, I want to lose a little bit of weight, what are the measures to go about that?
Salt number one.
Salt number one. You can cut that out. What about your sleep? Don't go to your bedroom with a cell phone. Make sure your bedroom doesn't have the TV on. These are things that you can do on your own level. You don't even need government in that area. These are things within your control. How much water are you drinking? We see a lot of people, they come to the clinic, their urine is always colored and is never a bother to them. Their urine forms is never a bother to them. That tells me they're dehydrated. Their blood pressure is about to go up.
But then you see people say, okay, I can't help this. So let me just stick with my drinking as much water as I can, because the kind of work I do, maybe I eat out a lot. I don't have a choice. I don't know. I cannot cook at home. So, or maybe I take herbal whatever to flush out the toxins in the system.
Detoxify.
Right?
So surrounding that are a bunch of myths, and we need to face it. Just like people will tell you, oh, I cannot get enough sleep during the week, I'm going to make it up on weekend. It's never possible. The body doesn't function on that. So again, if you know that you cannot help it, you have to eat a lot of mama food, then start walking more. We don't walk. If you walk more, you actually will be able to sweat some of this out.
Oh,
so
great.
there are things we can do to mitigate this, but we know the ultimate goal is reduce salt consumption.
So how about those who say they use seasonings, but they don't add salt into their meals? Okay. Is that also another way?
Yeah, that's also another way, because you be mindful of which seasoning you are using. Some of these seasonings also have sodium in it, but you can be educated about it and look at what you're putting. But you have other options: the ginger, the garlic, the crayfish, the cloves.
Locust beans.
Locust beans. These are what our grandparents used to use, and they were, as far as we know, mostly organic. So the more you can do that, you start switching. And again, you have only 7 days. Your taste buds will forget about it.
7 days and counting. But then there's also the aspect of some salt. I'm coming back to this matter where you say it has vitamin this and that, and so all those do not even count.
Absolutely.
Really?
Because once you look at the label and you see the word sodium, that should be a poisoning. You want to stay away from it. Because we know, the research is abundantly clear. We know, especially for black people. The study came out now, we're talking about this because they actually related it to white people and to people with normal blood pressure. That salt consumption is now a risk factor for cardiovascular issues. And what it does to your blood vessel and my blood vessel is oxidation. So that's like when you put a metal outside and moisture gets on it, it rusts. That metal becomes rusty and it gets weakened. The same thing is the effect of salt to your blood vessel and my blood vessel. And that's how it leads to stroke. That's how it leads to heart attack.
So then what are the symptoms then of persons, I think we need to talk about this, who perhaps are now at the verge of a cardiovascular disease or heart attack? What are the signs they should see and know that, we know what, I need to start working on addressing this matter?
Absolutely fantastic question. So for men in my clinic, we see the men coming in, they're having swollen ankle. The ankles were not swollen before. That tells them that the heart is struggling. It's struggling because there's too much water. Where is that water coming from? The salt you're eating. A man that was not known to be snoring all of a sudden starts snoring. His neck size, you normally buy your husband the shirt, is now gone up. It's now 17 and above. Those are signs of cardiovascular. Wow. He used to be able to walk with his kids. Now when he pick up the kids, he's having difficulty breathing. In the bedroom, he's not able to perform. That's the erectile dysfunction. We see it. He's not able to have that. Or newly married young men is not able to get the woman pregnant. Those are signs and symptoms of cardiovascular issues. And so it needs to be.
That's for men.
That's for men.
That's for me.
For women.
Is it
Let's
the
balance
same?
it.
Yeah, it's almost the same.
Almost the same.
Women will also have increase in their hip size, and they will know, because we expect some women that are pregnant to have swollen feet. We know, and that's because of retention. The baby is developing. Baby will push on the blood vessels.
Yeah.
But as soon as delivery is over, those are supposed to go away. If they don't go away, then you need to go back to your doctor. What's causing my pregnancy-induced hypertension? It might be the salt that you were eating. It's related. They're all connected.
And but then it's not over yet. Even with these signs, you also mentioned urine. The color of your urine is also a sign.
Yes.
Kidney stones. I don't know if kidney stones has a
Blood
relation.
clots and all of those.
Blood clot especially, or you find out that you're sitting for too long. And some men, even during the day, they just fall asleep. If you don't engage them, they start falling asleep. They're becoming insomniac and they're becoming narcoleptic. You go to pee in the morning, your urine is colored. You drink more water, it's still colored. That's a sign that cardiovascular issues is around the corner. You pee in the bowl and your urine foams up. It's not supposed to foam. Your urine is supposed to be like water. That's a sign.
And the way to go is basically...
Cut out the salt, increase your physical activity, walk some more, drink some more water, and wait for it, engage in good sex.
Now that's...
Right.
Okay. Now, there's a question I have to ask, because this matter of drinking water, I hear that for it to get to the organs, and you have to add salt for it to really get to the other organs, because there are those who drink loads of water, yet are still, they do not have as much in the system as it is, but until you add salt, then you can feel the impact on your organs. So how do we totally also cut that off?
Absolutely. So what we recommend is not salt. That's a myth. What we recommend is anything that has electrolytes. So you can add lime, you can add lemon to your water. What that does is it gives you citrus in that water and allows you to get into your vein rather than you just pee it out. So yes, because some people will complain that they don't like the taste of water, they cannot drink it like that. Or right. So you can add like lemon or lime to it, or you can even put a little bit of honey just to sweeten it. That allows your water to get into your vein.
Okay, electrolytes.
Yes, electrolytes. And the way you know that you've drank enough is the color of your urine. Your urine needs to be clear, it cannot form bubbles. If you see any of those, you are dehydrated, and those are early signs of cardiovascular issues.
Right. But then, of course, as a way to balance this, ORT, for example,
yes.
now, using salt
oral rehydration therapy.
And all of that. Is that still the way to go?
Yeah, that's still the way to go. The reason we give ORT, especially in kids who have had diarrhea and we know that their blood pressure is dropping, then we give them oral rehydration, because we need to save you before we actually know what's going on. We cannot lose you and be saying, oh, this is probably what happened. So ORT does work. But when we're talking about adults and you have control over what you eat, you need to cut out the salt.
Importantly, have control over what you eat. That's quite difficult in the right now when you look at the economic situation, because getting ginger, getting all those cloves and all of that, it's quite a tough one. But all in all, your final admonition to Nigerians, and then especially to parents, how they can, just save their kids from all of these issues at the end of the day. Because we are seeing children having cardiovascular issues, being obese and all of that. So how do we then begin to balance meals moving forward, now that we know salt is a danger?
Excellent. Fantastic for parents. If you can minimize how much your kids eat outside, it's better, because then you take control back. Once you take control back, that you restrict them from eating outside. So maybe even if it's dinner that you guys eat as family, you can control how much sodium is in that dinner. Increase their physical activity. Michelle Obama launched the 1 hour a day. There is benefit to that, because we're not moving. If you're not moving, sedentary lifestyle leads to cardiovascular issues. And the earlier you get your kids involved, the better. Make sure your kids go to bed early. Let them to get good sleep. If they're not sleeping early, we see young boys.
How early is early?
So depending on their age, we recommend 8 p.m. and let them sleep till 4, 5 in the morning. The more sleep they get, the better. That is the only time the brain can recalibrate. If they're sleeping against the circadian rhythm, they're going to develop high blood pressure. They've done that. We looked at this even for a child. We looked at this in the US. People who work night shift, all of them develop cardiovascular issues. Doctors, nurses, everybody that work night shift.
How about those who work morning shift, early morning shift?
So, I mean, cardiovascular,
Right.
especially for us in this part of the world, cardiovascular is a big one. We're not inundated with infection. We do get them, but the highlights of silent killers, high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, metabolic syndrome, it's all linked to what we eat. So it's better, the sooner we eat our food as medicine, if not, we're going to eat medicine as food.
As food, right?
Yeah, I now recall that you mentioned something about organic food, but there's also, we are seeing other kinds of food items as it is that are not necessarily organic. Do they also pose a danger?
Absolutely, because you want to be mindful of what they put in those food, and the more fiber you can get. Fiber was what they extracted away from organic that becomes all this process. The more fiber you can get, the better for you, because you need your GI system to work well. So there will be less stress on your cardiovascular system.
Right.
So much has been said, so much to unpack from this conversation, but we must thank you, Dr. Rashid Abbasi, Medical Consultant and Chief Medical Director, Heritage Men's Clinic, for your time on the program.
Thank you.
And the education. Thank you.
All right, still ahead on TVC Breakfast. The new world record is set to be broken by Nigerian-born media professional